Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, your weekly snapshot of the biggest business stories, their context, their relevance and impact. I'm Govindraj, Ethiraj. This week, the Union Cabinet approved the dilution of government stake in 3 top energy sector companies. This is expected to fetch the government over 45,000 crore rupees. The government is to sell 10% of its stake in Coal India Limited, 5% in crude production refining giant ONGC, and 11% share in public sector hydroelectric company NHPC. The stake sale is likely to help the government meet the budget target of keeping fiscal deficit under 4.1% of GDP. The government is likely to adopt the offer for sale route as it is easier to execute with special measures for retail investors. Well, the centre's fiscal deficit for the first 4 months of the financial year has already exceeded 60% of the budget estimates for the full year. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs also cleared 287 crore rupees to clear dues of 11 loss-making public sector units, including HMT. Joining me now to discuss this issue is Dr. Brinda Jagirdar, former General Manager and Head Economic Research at the State Bank of India. Dr. Jagirdar, thank you very much for being with us. So tell us, this is obviously a good start. Does this is this in keeping with the kind of timetable you were expecting this government to stick to?
Yes, certainly, because the government, what it said was its fiscal deficit target would be within this 4.1%. So, and it would also, it also announced a target of disinvestment of 40,000 crores. So I think it's very much on the lines of what the government had announced, and it's very much within the target.
Okay. Now, and it obviously also takes good advantage of the fact that the markets are strong, and which is obviously a good time because the valuation is strong. What lies ahead? What should be next? I mean, is this disinvestment for the sake of raising funds sufficient, or should there be something more?
Now, let's see, why is it that you have to privatize? Why is it that privatization actually happens? One reason is the fisc, but that's only one reason. The second is to allow the commercial entities to be managed, to be run as commercial entities and not as government departments. But I think a more important reason, a third reason I would say, is to expand retail participation and help the equity markets to gain some momentum. So I think in all, keeping all these factors into account, the timing is very good, and this certainly will help the government's fiscal position.
What about the selection of the companies themselves? Do you feel that's following a certain path?
They are certainly looking at this company selection of the companies as, I mean, it will be lapped up by the market. But, it reminds me when Malaysia, now world over privatization has happened. Now Malaysia, what it did was, initially it privatized its national lottery. Argentina privatized the national zoo. And Czechoslovakia, this is before they had broken up, it privatized the Communist Party guest house. So you see, there are certain things which the government will want to offload, which they don't really require to run immediately. But in the case of these companies, these are very good companies, something which the market would be interested in and which the investors would be interested in.
But, and it also creates a sort of a path to, let's say, disinvest companies which may not be so attractive, but may still be of some value to investors down the line.
Right, down the line. But let me just come back here. The disinvestment, it's not something just to fill the coffers. I think it should have a broader objective of actually using these funds to be plowed back into the company for better capital investment and better growth, and also to create a safety net for the workers. So I think to that extent, this limited the step is fine, but I think overall it should be it should have a bigger objective, not just filling the
fist. But is that possible given the fact that, as we said, the centre's fiscal deficit in the first 4 months has already crossed 60% of budget estimates?
That's true. That's the immediate, so it meets the immediate requirement. But I'm saying going forward, this disinvestment should be seen in a larger context. And let me just add something here. Now, if we look at the global experience, disinvestment has always succeeded where it is part of an economic reforms program. So in that sense, yes, it is in India also that has happened. It should be well prepared. Now, for example, British Airways, British Telecom, they took 4 years to prepare these companies and then they offloaded. So if we are going to go on the a disinvestment path, on the privatization path in a bigger way, then I think it's important to prepare the companies and then to offload. So not in this case. This case is fine, but I'm just talking about a bigger picture.
They've already offered equity in the past, and they're already listed to that extent. So let's come back to the fisc for a moment. Where do we stand on that, apart from the fact that we are already 60% over budget estimates?
Yes, we are 60% over budget. But then let's not forget the economy is picking up now. So the government tax collections will also improve in the second half. So in the second half is likely to be much less stressful, and certainly offloading this, and when these collections come into the government coffers, and that will also help. So in that sense, it's a good step.
Okay. What are the kind of companies that the government should be getting out of doing? So, we've also noted, for instance, that the government has cleared, the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has cleared 287 crores for 11 loss-making public sector units, including HMT.
HMT is just, I think, closed down, right?
Yeah.
So that's because, look, the environment has changed. Google and Apple, they've come up with wearable products. And now, because you have everyone has a mobile, most people have a mobile, so they use that to see the time. So the watches in that sense are going out. So I think
watches is out, right? So there are so many other loss-making public sector units. Should the government be spending time on even monitoring them and then giving them money every year?
Like I said, you first need to prepare them. There has to be a turnaround. You can't just offload it because they have some value. So therefore, bring it up to a certain level. And I would again quote the UK experience over here, how they prepared the companies, prepared the markets, prepared the investors, and then they offloaded.
So what would be the key lesson if you were to contrast this round of disinvestment as it's starting with previous rounds, and what are the lessons?
Now, the company selection of the companies is very good. And the retail participation that the government has offered is also very good, and the investor interest is going to be very good looking at the companies. So in that sense, there seems to be a very serious effort at disinvestment and being able to garner resources for the fisc. So in that sense, this is fine. But going forward, we will need to be very careful, cautious about the companies we pick up, prepare them, and there has to be greater transparency, and also building up of a safety net.
So you're also saying in some ways that there was not as much transparency in the past?
Maybe. I mean, I'm not, I don't want to get into that argument, that discussion, but then I'm saying that there needs to be greater
transparency. We need to be cautious all the time.
Yes, we need to be cautious all the time. So there has to be transparency, like I said, and retail participation is very important.
Yeah. And also the point that you made earlier about ensuring that the proceeds of the disinvestment in some ways go back to the people in the company and the company itself.
Right, that's important.
Right. So what's the other key challenges, the macroeconomic challenges, which the government can manage, particularly from a tax and income point of view?
Tax, of course, is getting the tax reform. So GST, that's the biggest challenge. And there are a lot of positive noises coming out saying that it's going to be rolled out pretty soon. So I think that's very good. So if GST comes in, then India would become a whole, it will be, today we are one nation, but we are not one market. So that will help to make it one market. And certainly it will help growth. It will certainly help government's tax collections. Right. So that would be something very good. And this is again manageable. There seem to be some loose ends, but I think those could be tied up, and those seem manageable.
As we raise these funds from disinvestment, we also need to ensure that we are boosting the other sources of income for the government, so as to ensure you don't go back to disinvestment as a revenue source.
Yes, like I said,
that's really my question. Yeah.
Yes, it should not be seen as a revenue source. Right now, the government is sort of trying to bridge its fiscal deficit. So in that sense, I would say fine, the selection of the companies is also fine. So this is all right. But going forward, it should not be seen as a tool. It should not be seen as a panacea for strengthening the fisc. Right. So I think it's very important for the government to see what is the selection of the companies, the method of doing it, and the timing of offloading these.
Yeah. And of course, at this point of time, at least there's nothing to complain about.
Yes, that's true. At this point, there isn't.
Right. Dr. Jagirdar, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on this segment. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back on Policy Watch. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here with Policy Watch. India is staring at an acute power crisis as coal-based thermal power plants that account for nearly 1/3 of power generation have fuel stocks left for less than a week. A day-long power cut in Mumbai last week stoked fears that India may face a repeat of blackouts last seen in 2012. At the heart of the problem lies a mess in the coal sector. Reports say that in the northern region alone, 5,000 megawatt power generation capacity has been hit due to a lack of coal. The Central Electricity Authority data said that the country's largest producer, NTPC's power stations in Chhattisgarh, Haryana and Badarpur reported zero fuel stocks on August 28, 2014. Weak monsoon and dwindling hydropower generation has worsened the situation. And worse, a Supreme Court ruling that threatened to cancel 200 coal blocks sent shockwaves across the power generation sector. Many existing and proposed power plants were expecting to get coal from these mines. Lack of adequate power also threatens to derail India's planned economic recovery that topped 5% in the April-June quarter after 2.5 years. Joining me now to discuss this is former Central Electricity Regulatory Commission Chairman Pramod. Mr. Deo, thank you very much for speaking with us. So let's understand one thing. First of all, is this a coal problem or is it a power capacity problem?
Well, it's both. But obviously, as far as coal is concerned, which I'm not getting into what effect the Supreme Court judgment will have. That is something which will, I think, next time we can discuss. Right. But if we see, since the last 5 years plan that we have, we in the 2007 to 12, we really added something like 56,000 megawatt capacity, which is a record. So naturally, Coal India was not able to keep pace with that. Right. So the result was that they came with this thing that we will not be able to supply you more than 65%. And if you want anything above that, it will have to be imported coal. Now, imported coal prices that time I think were something like 100% more. Luckily, they have come down to 30% more. But the fact remains, imported coal is more expensive. So the result is that you had to manage within that. So this is not something new. This was known. But power sector also was placed rather comfortably. Comfortably, I will say in the political terms. Because what had happened is that at the time of Lok Sabha election, that's the time when you expect that the power demand will go up and all the state chief ministers would like to supply as much power as possible. But they were gripped by Kejriwal fever. So everybody wanted to reduce electricity prices. This can be done only via one way. You just buy less power and you subjectively have a load shedding program. So obviously rural areas are the first. You just supply to your capital and some of the urban areas. And second thing was the industrial production had also slowed down. Now this has an effect. That because
so you're saying there was never so much demand to take us to the position that we are in today?
I'm pointing out we had such a crisis, other crisis, power sector crisis, that we had.
So it was mitigated through other means, which
simple means because there was no demand, which demand was suppressed for political reasons, and also the industrial demand had gone down. So we had nearly reached 250 gigawatt, 250,000 megawatt capacity, and the peak demand was not exceeding 130 gigawatt. So that was the real crisis. What will happen? Because no state government was willing to sign any new power purchase agreement. Because number of private sector plants are ready, but they are not getting anyone to buy that power. So this was the situation. But after that, as the last quarter's financial results show, industrial production has gone up. Now when the industry demand goes up, all the state distribution companies, what we still call them electricity boards, are very happy to supply because they are the paying consumers and they cross-subsidize. So that is one effect. Second thing is that the monsoon effect. Because in north, monsoon is still nearly 36% short. So the result has been in north.
So all the hydroelectric capacity has...
No, not hydroelectric capacity, because those are all snow-fed rivers. But it is water pumping which is required for... in fact, there the problem comes different. Normally, when the slit comes, there are heavy rains in the north. You find that the hydropower plants had to be closed down. It is not because there is no water. That is a great interesting thing. But because now the Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, they all want water for paddy cultivation. So that demand has gone up. So these are the factors. Similarly in West, similar thing has happened. West has obviously more demand coming from industry, but also the agriculture pumping demand also has
So overall we are saying demand has shot up. We've not been adequately prepared for this situation.
Prepared for this, and the coal. And Coal India has increased its supply, but increased its supply in terms of what they had promised. And that's what exactly the government's 100-day release on the power sector achievement says.
So as we stand today, what are the solutions now?
What are the solutions? Solution is simple thing is that coal is going to be limited. So we have to import coal. Now the difficulty in importing coal comes is power prices will go up because the coal cost will go up. So it is the political thing. The chief ministers had to accept that we will be willing to buy this more expensive power. Because as you referred also to that Supreme Court judgment where they said that no increase in for cost pass-through will be allowed. It has a similar type of effect. So then obviously the private producers, if they are going to lose, if they produce more units, they are not going to generate.
Okay, so one is mentally be prepared for higher power prices, otherwise there is no solution.
This is the real crux of the problem, that the power prices are going to increase, whatever you do. Because the recent World Bank study shows that if in the next 5-year plan, you see power prices just without any supply cost going up at the rate of something like 6%, they will go up, and still the losses of your electricity boards will be of the order of 1,25,000 crores. That is the situation. So which means these losses have to be paid either by the state government from their budget, which obviously they can't pay. Otherwise, finally consumers had to pay.
Right. Okay. So be prepared for power price increases. Else there is no way capacity can rise because someone has to pay for that additional cost.
There is no way that capacity which is available
can
will be fully
start
utilized.
Actually powering up. Right. So number one. Number two. What about non-coal related solutions? Can there be any in the near future?
Non-coal related, there is no other solution because predominantly it is the coal. As far as the monsoon.
No. What I mean is non-conventional or let's say non-thermal power.
No, see, non-conventional is not something which you can meet your immediate demand. Non-conventional is something which we had to go on increasing because today its share is in energy terms is nearly say between 5 to 6%. In capacity terms it may be 12%. And there also there is a reluctance on the part of the electricity companies to buy that power because that's more expensive. So again you want to cut down costs, so you don't want to buy more. So that's not going to meet your immediate demand, even if though the gestation period is short. Other thing is that that power is not available whenever you want. Like the wind is available only at a certain times. Normally it coincides with monsoon season, and in the south, because of the winter rain that they get, that is another time you get it. Solar is something which we are still at a stage. It is something like 1500 megawatt we are talking about. So it is not that is going to meet. It's mainly is going to be
even enough for a small
not enough
city,
for this city. And it's you cannot schedule it. You cannot plan it that it will be available whenever it is planned. In fact, that is another problem. How to absorb that power, and it can be done, but it has to be done in a way by strengthening our grid. There are so many other things.
Right. Okay. So are there any other sort of policy prescriptions as we run out of time that we can still perhaps bring in to address this problem at a more crisis level?
I think the solution is willingness to pay of consumers. Because what we had tried in Maharashtra was that Pune model, where Pune was going to face load shedding. And Pune first the captive industry said we'll use our captive power, we will not draw from the grid, but spare the difference for using more expensive fuel. And so that time it was something like 11 rupees a unit. And as I said, they were paying peaking time 7 rupees, 8 rupees. So that difference had to be paid by all other consumers. Now that model has been standardized in Maharashtra, and I think the new energy minister also has spoken about it, how load shedding is now proportionate to...
So you're saying better balance between existing captive power generation capacity and consumers?
No, not only captive. You can also say that this more expensive power will be purchased, that more imported coal can be then used. Question comes is who is going to pay for that? So you have to tell the chief minister, yes, this power will be supplied, those who want that power.
Right. So eventually you're saying similar to the way we've decontrolled fuel prices and got adjusted to a regime where we are willing to pay less subsidies or partake less subsidies, the same should be happening in power as soon as possible.
That's right. That's the only thing.
Right. Okay. Right. Mr. Deo, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. And that's all we have time for in this edition of Policy Watch. We'll be back next week, same time. Thanks for watching.